Welcome to Smart Bites.
Great to be here.
In each exploration, we take a close look at some, intriguing questions, drawing insights from reliable articles and solid research.
That's the plan.
And today, we're diving into a topic that, let's face it, many are curious about in our super-connected world. What are the potential psychological and physiological effects of viewing internet pornography?
Yeah, it's a big question. We'll be looking at sources like a scientific review from PMC, some articles from Psychology Today, another from mentalhealth.com, and even a TEDx talk transcript.
Exactly. Our aim here is really to understand the current thinking on this, pretty complex issue. We want to separate what seems well-supported from maybe more speculative ideas.
And just give you, the listener, a clear overview of the potential effects without getting bogged down in jargon or taking sides on, the more charged aspects.
Right. So, first things first, just how widespread is this? What do the sources say about prevalence?
It's incredibly common.
Yeah.
Especially among younger people. Psychology Today points out over 90% of young men, particularly in the U.S., report watching porn videos regularly.
90%? That's huge.
It is. And the TEDx talk we looked at mentions that most boys are actually seeking it out by age 10.
10.
Wow. And the sheer volume. One platform, Pornhub, apparently sees over 90 billion videos viewed daily. By over 64 million visitors.
The scale is just hard to grasp.
Absolutely. And another stat from Psychology Today from 2022 showed 71% of teenagers said they'd intentionally viewed pornography in the past week. And the average age for that first look, around 12 years old. These numbers alone tell you this is something impacting a massive number of people.
Okay, so it's pervasive. Now let's dig into one of the core ideas that seems to run through several sources. This concept of internet pornography as a supernormal stimulus.
Right, yeah. Both the PMC review and the TEDx talk really lean into this.
So what makes it supernormal? What's different compared to, say, older forms of erotic material or real-life encounters?
Well, it seems to be a perfect storm of factors. The PMC review highlights things like the basically limitless novelty, there's always something new. Then there's the easy escalation to more intense content, the powerful visual format of video, and crucially, the user's ability to self-select exactly what pushes their buttons instantly.
Okay, that makes sense. And the novelty part seems key. The TEDx talk mentioned something called the Coolidge effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's based on this observation, I think it was originally with Rams, where a male's sexual interest gets completely renewed if you introduce a new female, even if he was unresponsive to the previous one.
Oh, okay.
And the idea is our brains release dopamine that reward chemicals not just for a genuinely new partner, but even for just a new image.
So our evolutionary wiring gets kind of hijacked by the endless stream online?
That's the argument. The TEDx talk puts it pretty vividly. You can see more hot babes, as he puts it, in 10 minutes online than our ancestors might have encountered in a lifetime.
Wow. So how does this hunter-gatherer brain, as the talk calls it, cope with this genetic bonanza?
Well, the argument is it doesn't cope very well, in a sense. It's highly susceptible. This constant, intense, easily available stimulation might actually lead to a rewiring of neural pathways.
Oh, rewiring. How so?
Associated with the specific behaviors of internet porn, use things like viewing alone, the voyeuristic aspect, the constant clicking, searching multiple tabs, fast-forwarding.
Oh, that rapid switcher.
Exactly. And the constant novelty, sometimes shock and surprise. It's a very, very different neurological experience compared to the give and take, the slower pace, the interpersonal cues of real-life intimacy.
Okay, and this is where we start seeing connections to potential real-world problems, right? The PMC review mentioned that maybe traditional reasons for things like erectile dysfunction, ED, or other issues don't fully explain the rise in younger men experiencing them.
Precisely. We're talking about men under 40 showing increases in ED, delayed ejaculation, lower sexual satisfaction, even diminished libido. And the PMC review suggests traditional risk factors don't seem to cover it all.
And they found links in language used online, too.
Yeah, that was interesting. They analyzed posts on an ED forum, medhelp.org, and found the word porn popped up frequently, alongside discussions of the mental aspects of ED.
So it's on people's minds in relation to the problem.
It seems so. And there are correlational studies, too. One with high school seniors found a link between frequency of use and low sexual desire. 16% using more than once a week reported low desire.
Compared to
0% of non-users in that study.
0 versus 16%. That's a stark difference.
It is. And it's not just desire. The PMC review also mentions studies on men seeking treatment for what's sometimes called hypersexuality, often involving frequent porn use.
Okay.
A significant majority, 71% in one study, also had sexual dysfunctions. A third of them reported difficulty reaching orgasm.
So there's a pattern emerging in these studies.
Definitely. And fMRI studies looking at brain activity add another layer. The PMC review cites one where compulsive users reported lower libido, or ED, specifically with physical partners.
But not when watching porn.
Exactly. Suggesting the arousal system was becoming specifically attuned to the online stimulus.
And then there are the clinical reports, the individual stories. Those can be quite powerful.
They really can. The PMC review includes several case studies, often involving servicemen. You see patterns like difficulties with erections or orgasm during intercourse, often linked to frequent porn and sometimes sex toy use.
And they saw improvement when they stopped.
In several cases, yes. Reversal of impotence, return of normal arousal patterns after stopping internet pornography. One compulsive user regained the ability to orgasm and ejaculate normally after stopping.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There was a 20-year-old serviceman who had trouble achieving orgasm during intercourse. He used pornography frequently, also sex toys, and apparently found the toy more stimulating than his fiancée at one point.
Oh, wow.
But his function improved after he stopped both. The suggestion was desensitization and altered stimulation threshold.
So his brain needed the more intense artificial stimulus.
That's the idea. Another case, a 40-year-old serviceman with ED. His pornography use increased, and he reported finding his wife not as stimulating. He tried stopping, but hadn't seen improvement after 3 months, so it's not always a quick fix.
Right. It might take time, or other factors could be involved.
True. But then a third case, a 24-year-old sailor had diminished interest in his wife, preferred pornography, but his ED completely disappeared after he stopped viewing.
These stories really illustrate that potential desensitization effect.
They do, and they align with broader findings. A study mentioned in the PMC review explicitly linked more frequent consumption to lower erectile function and overall sexual satisfaction. Gary Wilson, in that TEDx talk, also flags ED as a major reason some men actively decide to quit porn.
Okay, so the idea is that the unique nature of internet porn might be reshaping sexual responses.
Let's get into the brain science a bit more. The PMC review mentions delta FOSB. What's that about?
Right, delta FOSB. It's a protein that accumulates in the brain's reward system, the nucleus accumbens, specifically with repeated exposure to rewarding stimuli. Think drugs, but also potent natural rewards like sex.
And what does it do?
It essentially acts like a molecular switch that makes the brain more sensitive to those rewards and the cues associated with them. It increases the wanting or the craving for the stimulus over time. It's linked to sensitization.
So more exposure leads to more delta FOSB, which leads to more wanting.
That's the basic mechanism suggested. The PMC review notes this happens in similar brain regions for both addictive drugs and sexual rewards, driven by dopamine release.
And brain scans back this up for porn use.
Some studies suggest so. The review mentions an fMRI study where compulsive users showed greater activation in brain areas linked to reward and craving when they saw explicit films.
More activity, okay. But interestingly, there seemed to be a dissociation between this wanting, the brain's craving response, and actual reported liking or pleasure. This points towards a kind of pathological learning where the drive becomes disconnected from the enjoyment.
That's fascinating, like the habit takes over.
Kind of. It ties into incentive salience theory, the idea that the brain assigns excessive importance or salience to porn cues.
Making them harder to resist.
Exactly. The PMC review connects this greater reactivity to porn cues, the cravings, the compulsive use, with reported sexual difficulties and less desire for actual partners.
So the brain's attention gets pulled away from real life.
That's one interpretation.
Yeah.
An EEG study measuring brain waves found a stronger P300 response that's a marker of attention and cue reactivity to sexual images in those with problematic use.
Okay.
And crucially, that stronger P300 response was negatively correlated with desire for sex with a partner. More brain reactivity to porn images, less desire for partnered sex.
So the brain gets really good at responding to porn, maybe at the expense of responding to a real person.
That seems to be the concern raised. The PMC review talks about the potential for decreased reward sensitivity, hypoactivity to more normal stimuli, like partnered sex.
Leading to tolerance? Needing more extreme stuff?
Potentially, yes. If the usual level isn't providing the same reward hit, the drive might be to seek out more novel or intense content to get that dopamine release. It's like needing stronger coffee over time.
Got it. And Are there structural brain differences noted?
There's some research on that too, though. It's complex. One fMRI study cited in the PMC review found that men who reported more hours per week and more years of pornography viewing had a smaller volume in the right caudate.
The caudate. What's its role?
It's involved in processing rewards, but also in things like approach behavior, attachment, even romantic love.
Smaller volume.
And that same study also found lower activation in the left putamen, another area linked to sexual arousal, when these men viewed explicit photos. The researchers suggested this might reflect a downregulation, like the brain turning down its own natural response to sexual stimuli due to overexposure.
Okay, but we should add a caveat here. Our Psychology Today sources pointed out that the porn addiction label is tricky.
That's a really important point, yes. They mentioned that scans of people who believe they are addicted don't always show those classic addiction-related brain activity patterns.
Suggesting maybe other things are going on?
Right. Sometimes the behavior might be more related to underlying issues like depression or anxiety or perhaps obsessive-compulsive tendencies. It's not always a straightforward addiction pathway in the way we think of, say, substance addiction.
And porn addiction isn't an official diagnosis in the main psychiatric manual, the DSM-5, right?
Correct. However, Psychology Today does note that the ICD-11, which is the International Classification System, does include compulsive sexual behavior disorder, or CSBD.
And that can include compulsive porn use.
Yes, it explicitly can. So, while the terminology is debated, the idea of problematic compulsive use leading to negative consequences is recognized clinically.
And the mentalhealth.com article talked about treatment needing to be holistic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Addressing just the pornography use might not be enough if there's co-occurring depression or anxiety. Treating both together is often more beneficial.
Okay, let's broaden out from the brain and sexual function. What about the wider psychological and emotional impacts? The Psychology Today and mentalhealth.com articles covered this.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. A consistent theme is a link between frequent pornography use and heightened anxiety, more depressive symptoms, increased stress, and also feelings of loneliness.
Loneliness. That seems counterintuitive, maybe.
Well, Psychology Today talks about a potential loneliness paradox. Someone might initially turn to porn because they feel lonely or disconnected, but the nature of the activity, solitary, often involving shame or guilt if it feels out of control, can end up increasing isolation.
Okay. And anxiety can come in different forms.
Right. There's potential social anxiety or performance anxiety in real life, possibly fueled by unrealistic expectations set by porn, but also what Psychology Today called addiction-related anxiety, that feeling of restlessness, guilt, or preoccupation with the behavior itself.
And the unrealistic expectations. That seems like a major issue for relationships.
Definitely. Psychology Today explains how the often highly choreographed, exaggerated, and frankly unrealistic scenarios in much pornography can shape beliefs about what sex should be like, how partners should look or act.
Leading to disappointment or dissatisfaction in real life.
Potentially, yes. It can create pressure and make authentic connection harder. And mentalhealth.com adds another layer about moral conflict.
How so?
If someone's pornography use clashes with their own moral beliefs or values, it can generate significant guilt and shame, negatively impacting their self-perception and potentially feeding into depression.
And using porn to cope with those bad feelings.
Can create a vicious cycle. mentalhealth.com notes that using it to numb negative emotions associated with depression might offer temporary relief, but could actually worsen things long-term, possibly by affecting neurochemical balance.
Okay, this sounds like it can become quite a tangled web. Psychology Today offered some indicators for when use might be crossing into problematic territory, PPU, they called it.
Yes, problematic pornography use. They loaned out several signs that might suggest use is becoming harmful or compulsive.
What are some key ones?
Things like obsessive viewing or preoccupation, maybe thinking about it constantly or spending large chunks of time like 5-6 hours a day, as some report.
That's a lot of time.
It is. Also, feeling unable to stop or cut down, even if you want to, that sense of losing control. Neglecting important parts of life like work, school, relationships, or hobbies because of viewing habits.
And the emotional side.
Experiencing significant emotional distress related to the use, intense guilt, shame, anxiety, or depression afterwards, or about the behavior itself. That's a big one.
We also talked about tolerance earlier.
Right, that's on the list too. Needing more frequent, more intense, or different types of content to get the same effect, and experiencing withdrawal-like symptoms if you try to stop things like irritability, strong cravings, restlessness.
And just continuing despite knowing it's causing problems.
Exactly. Continuing the behavior despite clear negative consequences in your life, relationship issues, job problems, mental health decline, and finally using porn as a primary go-to coping mechanism for stress, boredom, sadness, or other difficult emotions.
That's a helpful checklist for self-reflection. Now, what about the specific impact on adolescence? That Psychology Today article raised some serious concerns.
It really did. It stressed that the vast majority of teens are viewing pornography, and often it's not mild stuff. It can be hardcore, sometimes violent content.
And starting young, average first exposure around 12.
Yes, and about 15% even younger, 10 or below. The main concern raised is that this often unrealistic, hypersexualized content is effectively becoming the main form of sex education for many young people.
A kind of de facto sex ed that's potentially very skewed.
Precisely. The article cited systematic reviews suggesting links between teen viewing and developing strong, often rigid gender stereotypes. Also, earlier initiation of sexual intercourse, often with a more casual attitude towards it, having more sexual partners, engaging in a wider range of sexual activities, and even an association with using substances during sex.
That's a concerning cluster of associations. Did the type of porn matter?
Interestingly, yes. The article mentioned that content focusing more on passion or romance was linked to higher sexual satisfaction later on,
Oh, okay.
whereas content featuring themes of power, control, or roughness was linked to lower satisfaction and poorer sexual function, at least in the studies on cisgender men they cited.
So it's not monolithic, but the overall concern remains.
Yes, particularly with frequent exposure, especially to aggressive or highly unrealistic content. The worry is it shapes unhealthy expectations about sex, consent, and relationships, potentially hindering the development of healthy intimacy skills.
So the key message for parents or educators is,
Open, factual, non-judgmental conversations, emphasizing that pornography isn't reality, helping teens develop critical media literacy skills to understand what they're seeing.
makes sense. And finally, are some people more vulnerable to potential negative impacts than others?
Yes, the Psychology Today article on psychological effects outlines several vulnerability factors. Adolescence itself is one, due to the developing brain, identity formation, peer influence, and the impact of early exposure.
What else?
Pre-existing mental health conditions like depression or anxiety, people might use porn to self-medicate, which can worsen both issues. Certain personality traits, like high impulsivity or sensation-seeking, a history of trauma or abuse is also a significant factor.
Are there gender differences?
Some research suggests differences. Men seem statistically more likely to report problematic use, loneliness linked to use, and porn-induced erectile dysfunction, PIED. Some studies link use in women more strongly to things like body image issues or, in severe cases, suicidal ideation, though more research is needed there.
Other factors.
Family issues, lack of social support, general loneliness, potential genetic predispositions influencing reward sensitivity, and having a history of other addictions can all increase susceptibility.
So it's a complex interplay of biology, psychology, and environment.
Absolutely. It's rarely just one thing.
But the sources did offer some positive directions, ways to move towards well-being.
Yes, definitely. Psychology Today emphasized consciously focusing on building and nurturing real-life intimacy and connection.
Putting energy there instead.
Exactly. Cultivating diverse interests and hobbies outside of the digital world. Practicing mindful internet use, being intentional about when and why you're online.
And for young people, as we said.
Those open, factual, non-judgmental conversations are key, helping them understand media, question what they see, and build a foundation based on realistic, healthy views of sexuality and relationships.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground. The sources we've dug into today, they really paint a complex, sometimes quite concerning picture.
They do. It's clear that internet pornography is incredibly widespread, easily accessible. But there's this growing body of research, plus clinical observations, suggesting potential links between heavy or compulsive use and a whole range of challenges.
Right. Everything from sexual dysfunctions like ED or difficulty orgasming.
To measurable changes in the brain's reward pathways, increased anxiety and depression, feelings of loneliness, relationship strain.
And specific developmental concerns when it comes to adolescents encountering this material early and often.
And that concept of the supernormal stimulus really stands out, doesn't it? The idea that the sheer intensity and novelty of internet porn might be conditioning our brains in ways that don't map well onto the complexities and nuances of real-world intimacy.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea. And the personal accounts, those clinical reports of people seeing real improvements after cutting back or stopping, they add a compelling human dimension to the data?
They absolutely do. It underscores that for some individuals, the impact is very real and significant, and that change is possible. It definitely highlights the need for more research and open conversation.
So for you listening, what's the main takeaway here? I think it really comes down to self-awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah, being conscious of our own digital consumption habits. Thinking critically about the content we engage with and how it might be affecting us, our relationships, our expectations.
It's like any powerful tool or potent experience, understanding its potential effects, both good and bad, is really key to navigating it in a healthy way.
Absolutely. It's about informed choices.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you to mull over. In a world where this kind of hyper-stimulating digital content is always just a click away,
How do we intentionally cultivate, protect, and truly appreciate the quieter, more nuanced, but ultimately perhaps more deeply rewarding aspects of real-life human connection and intimacy?
that's definitely something worth reflecting on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today on Smart Bites.